Elder millennials, what stereotype aggravates you the most?
The use of the term millennial to refer to the general young person.
I had to go on a business trip and work with an older lady who was just about ready to retire. I manage trade shows and travel around North America to convention centers and hotels organizing events. She had an old-school way of checking inventory by hand. I'm pretty good with Excel and Salesforce, so I had a faster way of doing it. I got the job done like I've been doing for years and left so I could go enjoy Vancouver. We've all heard the saying work smarter, not harder. She couldn't get it through her head that the workday was done for me. I found out from another colleague that she called me a lazy entitled millennial with no work ethic. So that's the stereotype I hate. I busted my ass and paid my way through college. I worked long hours and kissed ass to get to the position I'm in. I know plenty of other young professionals that have done the same. This idea from baby boomers that we're entitled or lazy gets tiresome.
When people call teens and early 20s millennials, that was like 10 to 15 years ago.
I, for one, am tired of hearing about the things we've killed. Tastes change all the time. This is not new.
That we're entitled.
Having worked with the general public for over a decade,
I can assure you the overwhelming majority of entitled and rude behavior comes from the over 50s crowd.
Edit.
Also, they keep telling us to be more financially responsible, but when we are there, like, no. Not like that.
Can't wait to tell my judgmental extended family that I'm having a backyard wedding because I
don't have $30K just lying around. My parents are already pissed about it.
We got blamed for spring break COVID outbreaks. We aren't in college anymore.
I'm getting really tired of hearing about us lying around expecting handouts and not working. Especially when it's a situation where the person saying it is standing in a room with a lot of millennials, all of whom have jobs.
Which is every single time I've heard this said in real life. Like,
who here is lying around doing nothing?
Who's your example? Oh, it's your neighbor's best friend's cousin's son. He doesn't have a job and lies on the couch all day. Okay.
That people don't own a house because they're lazy.
I have taken the time to explain the loss of buying power,
stagnant wages,
automation,
contract employees, lack of job security, cost of living in other areas, etc. Play way more into it.
When someone makes mention of some challenge teenagers are doing, like eating Tide Pods, and people are like, ugh.
Millennials. No. Just because 4 to 5 people did something stupid and then the news decided to take it and run with it
and make it sound way more widespread than it is, doesn't mean you get to generalize a whole generation. Secondly,
millennials are practically the age of the parents of the TikTok generation.
It's not a generic term for any young person doing something you don't like. That we don't take our jobs seriously. I had to sit my peer, 55 plus, down and tell him that the millennials he was bitching about were the same age as the very
qualified and mission-focused person he's been working with for the past decade.
We're upper management. As an American,
it's basically that we're inheriting a system that nobody trusts us to run. All the people who represent us are 2 to 3 times older than us. The older generations are refusing or unable to retire, which is preventing us from actually
entering the job market. You must go to college and get a degree.
You don't want to be flipping burgers or changing the oil in some rich guy's car. Asterisk does that.
Incurs a lot of debt. Asterisk. These irresponsible millennials and their elitist liberal educations. If they'd been smart,
they'd go to community college and transfer. Go to trade school. They won't just take a job.
Any job to pay the bills. They could flip burgers. Why should we pay for their mistakes?
Quote.
I just shoveled like 20 of my elderly neighbors' driveways this morning after snowpocalypse.
By Wednesday.
While chatting they'll talk about those lazy millennials like they're still 20-year-olds. Bro.
I'm 38 and got 4 kids and own the biggest house of this block. Am millennial.
Cannot convince them of this.
Ever.
We can't afford houses because apparently we spend too much on avocado toast.
No.
In the 80s and 90s houses were about 3 to 4 times the average annual income. Now it's close to 10. At least in my part of the world. Like many.
I am working from home.
I'll get a call from my mom. Hey, you are not working now.
Go do something for me. Thanks. Working from home is way shitter than going to real work.
At least for me.
I do fit the stereotype of hating talking on the phone.
Participation trophies, these were for our boomer parents.
Not for us. And now we are blamed by them for being entitled because we got them. We are what the previous generation made us, and we have been shaped by the world we were raised in.
And then we are attacked for who we've
been perceived to
become as a result. It's like getting angry at the puddle of milk because you threw the carton on the floor.
Being blamed for not buying things. Like,
millennials are killing X product line.
Welp. The boomers who won't retire are clinging to the top-level jobs. So we don't have the opportunities they did to move up and earn more money. So we have to be choosy about the things we spend our money on.
Not to mention, most of us are trying to be mindful of our consumerism as a whole. Not buying tons of stuff for the sake of having tons of stuff. I kinda laugh when boomers call us snowflakes when they seem like the bigger bunch of wimps in
history. Anytime they get a taste of their own medicine, they act like it's an assault on their freedom.
When millennials do shit that Gen Zers and boomers did. But for some reason we get derided as the shittiest generation to ever get whelped.
When millennials take cooking classes and sewing classes and basic auto repair classes.
And other shit our parents were too busy to teach us.
But no one ever talks about that part. We're derided as being helpless and needing adulting classes.
When Gen Xers and boomers did literally exactly the same thing.
It was celebrated at self-improvement and the American dream and called taking a class down at
the Y Learning Annex Community College . When all the college kids were out partying during the pandemic were called millennials.
That was Gen Z.
I had family blaming my generation for this shit. It really pisses me off how older generations constantly perpetuate the idea that millennials have no manners and are just inherently shitty and rude. I have worked in retail, a call center,
and social services for my entire working life.
So I have communicated with a lot of different people from all age groups and all walks of life. Without a doubt, there is an absolute and distinct difference in manners between millennials and folks from older
generations. Of course I can't paint everyone with a broad brush.
But if I had to list the 100 most entitled,
batshit crazy,
unbelievably rude people I have ever spoken to,
maybe only 10 of them would be millennials.
The stereotype that a lot of millennials are struggling with money because they're lazy and
entitled is ridiculous. Look at the average wage versus the cost of rent,
healthcare, and higher education now, versus what it was a few decades ago. Boomers had it far easier than we did, but act like our generation's struggles just boil down to a lack of hard work.
Also,
the participation trophy meme,
aside from being largely bullshit anyway,
raises the question, whose generation was giving out the participation trophies?
Why would you blame the kids who received them?
I'm 31. I played golf with my father around Christmas. Before I got fired, he asked how my job was going. I said it was okay.
Stressful.
And they were giving me more responsibility. He asked if they were gonna pay me more. And I just laughed for a good few minutes. He had a bewildered look and said, "Well, that's how it's supposed to work, isn't it? You need to stand up for yourself and demand more money." I seriously looked at him and asked where.
He's been the last 20 years.
Employers don't like your tone of voice. They kick you to the curb and get someone else willing to be their robot and be programmed to how.
They demand you act and carry out tasks. I'll start. Avocado toast is the reason we won't be able to retire. Born in 85.
Here. And my biggest irritation is that so many boomers refuse to retire.
I get that some are unable to. But many more can. Yet won't.
Get off the goddamn pot and let the rest of US shit. Please. That I am an entitled,
unwilling, undriven individual who has no interest in having children,
saving for my future, getting married, or buying a home.
This irritates me the most because I am a married with 2 kids,
homeowning,
business owner,
with a home that I pay the mortgage on.
Evidently.
That doesn't actually matter, however, because if I ever end up being correct about anything, I am really just young and naive, and can be ignored.
I am 33. 1981 here. The stereotypes are amazing. Every time I hear an insult aimed at millennials, I'm amazed and amused
that anyone thought it was an insult.
An entire demographic dedicated to making sure everyone is doing something they believe in. That we all get the support we need.
And putting Applebee's out of business.
I'm honored to be counted among them on a technicality. So I'm 33.
Millennial age.
Right?
And I deliver pizza. I have 2 co-workers who are both 66.
If I ever don't get a tip,
I just shrug it off. It hardly ever happens. And it's not required.
When either of them don't get a tip,
they throw fucking pissy fits. I don't hear the end of it.
So I just think it's funny that my generation is the one seen as entitled. That I'm lazy and entitled.
60 hours a week logging while middle-class boomers take 2-hour lunch breaks and take a half day off.
For golf. My parents are on the early end of Gen X. 66.
And I tend to be on the lower end of the millennial generation depending on which sources you look
at. 90. I constantly remind them that I am a millennial and I have been part of the workforce for a decade now. Millennials are not some spring chickens with zero work experience demanding upper management salaries.
We're people who have been working 10 to 20 years now demanding an actual COLA. Millennials being freewheeling, emotionally fragile art students who are forever poor and can't perform basic adult responsibilities. I guess that's 5 stereotypes. But they're all aggravating.
The 2 stereotypes that irk me the most are: 1. We don't work hard enough and want handouts. Since high school I've worked all kinds of jobs. Restaurants,
retail. I dabbled in construction while pursuing a trade. I've been to college,
etc.
And I still feel like I'm never going to have the lives my parents, grandparents have.
The cost of living just isn't the same, and I feel like every time I get a foothold on things their
goalpost gets pushed back.
I'm not lazy.
I'm just tired of trying so damn hard.
I don't want handouts.
I just want the tax dollars I pay to benefit me. These people are out of touch.
2.
We're soft, over-emotional snowflakes.
While working all these jobs the past 16 years, I've seen folks my parents' age explode at Walmart,
calling employees cocksuckers
because they weren't helped soon enough. I've seen grown men, 40+ years old, almost come to blows on a construction site over minor disagreements. I've seen boomers struggle to take advice from younger folks in their field despite the younger folks having the most up-to-date strategies too set in their ways. I've seen him bitch and moan over societal changes that don't affect them at all. I've seen how moody the older generations can be.
Don't act like my generation is a bunch of emotional crybabies when you're in your office having the
freak out because you can get your digital calendar to work right.
That we don't work hard.
We're the most overworked and underpaid generation.
I have a bachelor's and master's and $30,000 of debt, and I worked 2 jobs while in school and couldn't afford to pay for it.
I've been busting my ass for a decade making $10 to $13 an hour. Working over 40 hours a week.
No benefits. And the younger generation can suck my dick for claiming we aren't radical enough. For the love of God, we are simply trying to survive. When we are looked down upon for needing to use YouTube,
etc. for learning tasks, e.g. changing a tire, that our parents were taught by our grandparents, but the former never took the time to teach us.
We're better known as Zennials, because we relate more to the life experiences of Generation X kids than to younger millennials. It's those of us born 78 to 83. Anyway, I hate the stereotype that we don't know how to work and that our parents fight our battles for us.
Fool.
85% of us were latchkey kids that raised ourselves. That I'm a young kid, we're in our 30s now.
Not a millennial. Raised one. So sick of people who spend their 20s and 30s smoking, saying my kid is a spendthrift because they buy a $4 coffee every day to get them through their 5th 12-hour shift.
I'm 31.
Born in '89 and was told,
"Okay boomer," by a shitty little 14 to 16-year-old kid in a school uniform.
Never wanted to strike a child so much in my life.
Little fuck tried to cut in line. I asked him what he was doing. "The fuck you doing, kid?" Back of the line.
Quote, "Okay boomer. Should have just yeeted him right there and then."
That I don't know what a floppy dive is, or I don't know how to use a dial phone.
You just dial the number.
It's not that F******ing complex.
Where to start? Participation trophies. The whole snowflake thing. And the lazy thing are my 3 biggest. You created them.
We didn't want them then.
And no mom, dad.
I don't want the box of them you kept after me telling you repeated to throw them away. The biggest snowflakes I have ever met are all boomers whining about everything.
Most recently mask mandates. Suck it up,
Buttercup.
This isn't about you. Can't tell you how many times when I meet a coworker or client face to face who has complained
about the younger generation. Come face to face with an elder millennial who still looks younger than I am. I thought you would be older, or asking my older employees who report to me questions who turn to me for answers. Happens all the time. I hate that millennials get pinned as being addicted to their phones. Like, always behind a screen and not interacting with the real world. I for one try really hard to have good phone etiquette, and what I've noticed is
boomers can be really bad at this.
Some of the older people in my office and family are the worst offenders when it comes to texting at the table or just checking out on social media.
The whole lazy shit.
Most of my friends or peers are so overworked they barely have free time, and even when they do have free time, they are so burnt out many of them are seriously depressed and disassociate because the amount of effort put in is not equal to the value given back.
This shit is not how our species is supposed to live. And we are the generation really seeing that contrast and waking up from the perpetual motion
machine everyone has been asleep to.
We were born into a system that was broken, and we realize this. Boomers have very little concept of money as it relates to today's climate. Because they were able to get a 2-bedroom in the 70s for like $250 while working at
Walgreens. It's like two different realities. Millennials don't know how to.
Please bitch.
I rewired a rotary phone and washed Cappy out of my grandmother's 28.8 kilobits per second modem.
Older millennials had analog childhoods and digital adolescence. We can do nearly fuck all anything and expect the world to radically change every 10 years max. Sorry we killed the diamond ring, luxury hat, blacksmithing, plastic straw industry. Maybe you should have paid us reasonable wages and not crashed the housing market right as we graduated college. Hops on soapbox. I'm 32.
Born in 88.
And by far the most aggravating stereotype by boomers. Love whomever came up with this term.
And Gen X is that millennials are a broken, lazy generation. It irks me as they quickly forget a few important pieces.
1. We live in a time where the progression of technology is moving at an astounding pace that is largely influenced by millennials' creativity.
This technological progression allows us to continue to have the largest GDP in the world.
2.
Their idea of a generation lacking values is directly linked to how they as a generation parented Gen X and millennials. It is well studied that the outcome of how a person turns out is related to both nature and nurture. When the boomer generation hopped onto the consumerist wheel, it left others patenting their
children while they were out keeping up with the Joneses. 3. The logical fallacy of overgeneralizing such traits when each generation likely possesses a similar distribution of creatives, hard-working people,
and those riding on other people's coattails.
Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. Asterisk hops off soapbox. Asterisk. That were snowflakes. Baby boomers can't hear the word boomer without screaming bloody murder. And they can't handle being told they might be wrong about anything without throwing a hussy fit. But they shush tea on us constantly about some perceived sensitivity.
The whole lazy, refuse to work theme.
While we were signing the papers buying our house, they were shit-talking millennials saying then typical lazy and living in their parents' basement nonsense, and were totally oblivious to the fact
the house was being bought by millennials. The wife was a former teacher and husband worked retail, so also were oblivious to the fact
millennials in those same jobs now would not be able to afford said house.
Lazy, bitter, undeserving,
etc.
Probably bring blamed for Tide Pods. Everyone is so used to blaming us for everything that Gen Z is getting away with it.
No.
Actually it's that we're too addicted to technology. Older millennials.
30 is older.
Right. Lived in a time where technology was just starting to evolve. We didn't have tablets,
phones, computers, etc. We played outside.
We called each other on house phones. We were the last to know what privacy actually means. We weren't tracked.
We didn't have an online presence.
Emails were just starting out. We wrote letters. Everyone likes to tell us we're too nostalgic.
But I think we lived knowing the best of both. We lived both a simpler life
and the exciting new allure of technology. What is an elder millennial?
That I never had a long-term relationship, got married, had children or bought a home because I wanted to live with my parents,
eat Hot Pockets and play video games instead,
And not because you need a lot of money to do all those things and I don't have any money.